Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you're having a great day too. We're going to go ahead and just jump on into this again. I got no news to talk about. Everything's going pretty good. I got a mouthful of nicotine lozenges, and I'm feeling great. So, let's go ahead and get started with the first story. The first story is interesting because I have a super, super sensitive nose. To the point that, and this might disgust some of you guys, but it's natural. It's totally natural. I remember I've always been able to do this, but I never was able to tell what the smell was. As I got older and learned more about human biology, I started to figure it out. But especially when I was in high school, it happened a lot, and especially in college, it happened a lot. I would smell wet pennies every so often. I would smell it smelled like iron oxide or wet pennies would be another way to describe it. And I can smell when a woman's on her period. I can smell the blood. And it was something that I kind of figured out, but I never wanted to be like, hey, you on the rag? Like, I didn't want to really, say, so I never really had any confirmation until I was, maybe 19 or 20. I did end up discussing it with a woman. I said, yeah, I can smell when a woman's on her period. And she's like, really? It's like, yeah, it smells like pennies. And she's like, yeah, that's exactly what it is, dude. You're smelling it. So I have a super sensitive nose. And again, I'm not saying I can smell it while they're in the shower. I can be walking through Macy's and be like, oh, okay, someone's on their period in here. It's really strong. And I'm not trying to make women feel uncomfortable or anything like that. It's super rare for people to have such a sensitive nose. Super, super rare. But on the flip side of that, there have been times where I've walked into houses. I remember this happened not too long ago. I was with a friend. We went over to another friend's house. As we were driving back home, I remember going, are they having marital troubles? Are they having troubles there? My friend's like, I don't know. I think everything's okay. And I'm like, I think they're fighting a lot. And she goes, how do you know? And I'm like, I just have a feeling. Because you walk into people's houses. I can do this too. I can walk into someone's house and tell you how good your relationship is. Not because half the house is filled with video game stuff and the other house looks like it's out of Better Homes and Garden. There's a straight up schism in it. I can go into your house and basically get a sense of how good your relationship is. Not through any sort of trickery, not through any sort of magic. I never really figured out how to do it until now. I think I found the mechanism behind it. And this also plays a lot into ghosts and stuff like that as well. In 2015, they're in the Netherlands. So we're going to the year 2015. We're in the Netherlands. And we are visiting Utrecht University, good old UU, home of the Fighting Boers. And so Utrecht University did this study. And they go, I think as much as I crap on scientists, I think they'd actually be kind of a funny job because you just come up with bizarre stuff and start running scenarios. They said, let's see what happens when we expose women to male sweat. But not just any male sweat, we're going to expose them to terror sweat. So they brought these guys in, they brought in 30 dudes and said, here, we're going to give you a clean shirt. Don't wear any deodorant, nothing like that. Just come on over. Something a serial killer does to prep his victims. But anyways, I want you pure for the knife. I want you pure. But anyways, so these guys apparently have never seen Hostel. They go to this place and they have to follow all the instructions. They're given a clean shirt and they're given little sweat pads underneath their armpits. And at that point, they're showing one of three videos. Either a scary video, well, probably The Ring or something like that. The actual Ring video, and they're all dying. They're like, most of our participants died after 7 days. They show them a happy video, or they show them a neutral video. And through that little bit, they put their sweat pads under there, and it's not like then they had them run a marathon. Just that little bit of sweat. They took each swab out, whether or not they were watching one of those three videos, put it in a vial. A couple days later, they had these women show up. And they had their heads resting. Again, it's basically serial killer university. They had their heads locked into this little brace. So they couldn't move their heads. People are very trusting in the Netherlands. And they opened these vials up in front of the women. So they could get a whiff of this sweat. Now, some of the sweat smelled gross. Some of the sweat was a little BO-ish. Some of the sweat smelled kind of good. The guy had a good fruity flavor to him. And some of the sweat, you couldn't really smell it. But that's not what the scientists were looking for. They were looking and videotaping directly at the woman's face. And at the moment they got the first whiff of the vial, they recorded the subconscious facial reactions of the women. And this is what they found. Regardless of whether or not the BO was super stank or not, regardless of the actual smell. And this was a small sample size, but regardless of the actual smell, the women who were exposed to the neutral sweat had no real facial reaction, none of that subconscious facial reaction. But the women who were exposed to the fear sweat, for a brief second, their face showed fear. I don't think their eyes went super wide like Looney Tunes, but for a brief second, they looked like they were scared. And the women who were exposed to the happy smell, for a brief second, their face showed delight. And again, regardless of how stinky it was. They're like, oh my God, what does this guy eat? Asparagus every day? This is horrible. But in that brief first second, they'd be like, puppies. And so this is the thing. If your sweat can leave behind that sort of neurochemical trail, if you go into this house where there's domestic violence, where people are just beating each other up, they're leaving that fear and anger chemical in the air. And when you walk over, they're all dressed up and they got dinner ready and the television is showing Peppa Pig or whatever. Now, these women also were more sensitive smellers, so they were selected because they have a high sense of smell. So I think someone with a high sense of smell, like myself, could walk into a house and be like, there's something really serious going on here. Like, someone's getting the shit kicked out of them here. And I can't put it into words. I just walk into the house and I'm like, this house feels oppressive, was probably how I would express it. I probably wouldn't know in detail, but I'd walk in and I would get that whiff of that terror scent. You walk in our house, everything's super lovey-dovey. You walk in, you're like, this house feels like a home. This house feels like everyone inside loves each other. And this is why I think this is interesting. I always poo-poo on mediums. I think the idea of and we actually talked about this yesterday too. This is kind of a callback to that. Imagine mediums don't have any sort of psychic powers, but they're just really sensitive smellers. So they can go into a house where oppressive acts have happened and they're like, there is a dark foreboding in this house. But they don't know why they're having that feeling. And then yesterday I talked about the ghost of Wong and how I feel there may actually be a ghost there, but someone created a story about that. I think it's more likely that mediums have no magical powers, but they might just be super sensitive smellers. And they walk into a house and they're like, their first reaction is something wrong is here. And then they make up a story to explain why it's wrong. It's completely natural reaction. You walk in a house and you're like, this house feels troubled. Maybe an old-timey guy here chopped the head off his wife, and his wife is still floating around the basement. Because they're trying to explain that initial feeling they have. But I would also argue that I think most people, they got the sensitive smellers for this one, but I think most people, whether or not you know it, pick up on the smells of other humans. I think the sense of smell is completely underrated. So when you meet a person and they seem creepy or they seem, and you haven't really talked to them, you're drawn to them, or you want to stay away from them, it's most likely their scent. It's most likely you aren't necessarily being attracted to them or being warned away from them because of anything you can really explain. It's probably the chemical that they're putting out that you're picking up slightly, and your body's either saying, this guy's into some weirdo stuff, stay away from him, you're going to end up in his murder basement with your head locked into a brace having you smell sweat until he cuts your organs out, or he's giving off happy chemicals. And you're like, I think I could chill with this dude. He's pretty cool. I think the nose is completely underrated. I think this study proves that. And I think it may also help disprove or debunk the idea of walking into a house and sensing ghosts. That was a clip from our daily podcast, Dead Rabbit Radio. Dead Rabbit Radio is available anywhere that you listen to podcasts. It's daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime news. If you want to hear the full episode that this clip came from, check the link below. Please like and subscribe. And hit that little bell, too. That does some magical stuff. Thanks, guys.